big billion days is a big deal. Were you there?
Absolutely, I was there.
Like, was it smooth?
The results turned out to be something very, very different. The site went down. I remember we thought that we had done everything right from an engineering standpoint, and we all were absolutely like on our toes, anxious, because Sachin and Binny also were like in the corridors, in the desks, they were roaming around.
CTO of Cleartrip, CHRO of Flipkart, and now
Key people officer at Flipkart as well.
now the chief people officer of Nudge Institute was not an exceptional student, and he has achieved all of that. What was the decision? Did you decide that you want to shift internally to a people function?
I remember very, very famously sitting across a table with another very senior HR leader outside Flipkart, and she told me that this is the worst decision you could make, because in HR,
Were you paid less when you made that shift?
who said a CPO or a CHRO career from a remuneration standpoint stands to lose as compared to a CTO career.
So you mentioned about passion and what you are good at.
What you're good at may not necessarily be what your passion is also, by the way.
You always do something and then you do something else. So for example, your degree. You can be fit without running. What is that core motivation behind all of this?
For me, long distance running is like meditation. It allows me to get away from everything.
Why are you doing this? So today we have great tech leader Krishna with us, and what I'm more excited about than just being tech is people leader, right? And I was talking to someone at Flipkart. He mentioned, and he has worked with you on the tech side of things. So when you were in the engineering domain, and what he mentioned about you was he was always a people leader, and that brings really good excitement to me. So how are you, Krishna? How are
I'm
you feeling?
doing absolutely fine, Samyak. Thanks for inviting me for this conversation. It's a pleasure. I think it's something that I've always wanted to do and share my thoughts on a variety of subjects. I think one is obviously my journey, starting out in my career, obviously, as any other person would do, came into the engineering line. And then, so my career trajectory and the transition that you just spoke about into becoming a people leader. And then obviously a variety of topics on how do you develop a leadership mindset, working in sort of startups across both in the US and in India, and being part of a wonderful story called Flipkart. And that's meant so much to me in my life so far. It's given me so much. Yeah.
And who are you as a person? Like, what topics would you like to discuss beyond like your work, right? Who are you as a person actually?
Yeah, I think what led me down this path, I think as Steve Jobs famously said in his Stanford speech, right? Like when you look back, the dots connect. So talking a little bit about the journey and how I see the journey sort of that unfolded so far for me. And then talking a little bit about mindsets, talking about my passion for maybe running,
Yes.
for health and wellness in general. I think my interest in philosophy and what it's actually also given me through my life. And what I'm doing right now, actually, which is very exciting to me in this chapter of my life. So
Yeah,
maybe,
I think that is one most interesting piece, right? On how leading engineering or let us say you also work with Cleartrip, right? And developing code to developing people, right? And more than that, I think developing the entire nation is I would call it that way, right? So would really want to like hear from you about that. You mentioned health, right? So what all what is your schedule like when it comes to your well-being, health?
yeah. So I love long distance running.
What is long distance? 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers?
So nowadays everybody calls everything a marathon, but the marathon is actually technically a 42.2 kilometer race.
42 kilometers.
Yeah, 42.2.
0.2. Okay,
Yeah,
exactly.
very
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay.
And a half marathon is 21.1. And then you have 10-kilometer races, and then you have 5-kilometer races. So I'm particularly interested in the half marathon space and the full marathon space. And that's what I've been pursuing. So that schedule is very demanding. So I pretty much get up almost every day around 5 a.m. I have, 3 days a week that I strength train. And 3 days a week I have my runs.
Okay.
and 1 day of rest.
So one is health, right?
Yeah.
Being healthy, being fit, and then the other part of it is actually running for a marathon, right? So what is that core motivation behind all of this? You can be fit without running so many
Wow.
kilometers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say this, that for me, long distance running is like meditation. So for me, it allows me the space to be within myself. I have actually observed that when I'm running, many a times I get into a zone where there are zero thoughts in my mind. It's about where my foot is landing and where the next step is going to be. So it's a beautiful space for me because it allows me to get away from everything, work, family, everything. And many people actually search for this emptiness in their mind. And then I found it in running. So that's why actually I think I go after running all the time.
Sure. Is that common among, let us say, runners? This thing of being in a meditative state, is that common?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of runners talk about it. There's also something called a runner's high, which you experience like similar to somebody, drinking alcohol, but this is obviously a much healthier, much healthier
So
effect.
you're saying that you're getting that high every day, but in the morning?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow, wow.
My day starts with the high. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And then when it comes to, let us say, so tell me more about your experiences with running. Any good thought or any good incident that you remember?
I need to run a marathon. So I signed up for a marathon just 3 weeks after the Mumbai Marathon in Jaipur.
Okay.
And I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends, nothing.
Sure.
And then I just went to Jaipur and I ran the full marathon. And that was an experience of being extremely resilient and persevering towards your goal, right? And that's what running also teaches you, because you go through so many times, like you're almost hitting a wall when you are running long distances, when you cross 25, 30 kilometers. Your mind starts to trick you into believing that, why are you doing this? ये सब जरूरत है क्या?
Even today.
Even
Is it?
today.
Oh,
And then
how many marathons have you
so I've done
tried to
about,
run?
I think maybe close to 6 odd full marathons,
Okay.
but numerous half marathons.
When did it all start? As in, so did you feel at some point in time that I should do it? Or sometimes it might happen that you were doing it and then when you did not do it, you felt that there is something major missing?
Yeah. Like I said, it started during COVID. It started very slowly, but what kept me going is that it gave me immense satisfaction, energy. I felt better as a person,
Got it.
right? It de-stressed me. So movement does that to me. When my mind is cluttered with thoughts and I'm worrying about something or I'm stressed out about something, I go out for a run, and many times it's without thought, like I said. And when I come back, I have like a revelation on how to crack that problem. Or during the run, something emerges for me. So I feel better as a human being when I'm running. Yeah.
Right. And how about yoga? Like what all?
Yeah. So actually, my wife is a very advanced yoga therapist. She runs a yoga school herself.
Okay.
So we both did our instructor trainings together in the US. And so I draw a lot of inspiration from her. I do a bunch of yoga, very traditional yoga. One of the ways that I also try to balance my running, because running tends to be extremely, I would say, cardiac intensive, and it can sort of elevate, say, the levels of, say, cortisol in your bloodstream, right? Like, which is a stress hormone as well. So to balance that out, I do yoga nidra. So, like they say, right, 15 minutes or 20 minutes of yoga nidra is like equivalent to 5 hours of sleep. So sometimes I balance that out with my running. So just to kind of bring my body back to calming, very
So
peaceful
is
state.
it really just about lying and doing nothing? Is it, or do you do anything?
No, it's
Is there a pose that you do? Like what is it? Yeah.
It's typically shavasana, like you lie down, but it is a lot harder than it looks,
Okay.
because you should not sleep. So you are very aware of your body. You are aware of every part of your body. Think of it like a guided meditation, but when you're
Yeah.
lying down in
So I've
shavasana.
done that
Hmm.
few times, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So that really relaxes me.
When you joined Flipkart, how big was the team?
The engineering team was about 150 odd people.
150 people.
Yeah, and maybe the entire company was maybe under 1,000 people.
Right.
And today it's about 20,000 people.
20,000 people.
Yeah.
Right. Another piece was I see when I see at your career journey, right? I see that you always do something and then you do something else. So for example, your degree, right? And then perhaps at that stage, even your career. Let's go into those details, right? So take me to the earliest possible time that you can think of where,
Yeah.
let's say you're doing something and then you see that I'm not really finding a meaning into it, or maybe your version of it, right? And then you got into something which is more meaningful for you. And how did the society also
React to that.
react to that? Yeah.
No, that's a very interesting question, right, Samyak? I think I didn't think about it this way until very recently, but there was sort of like some sort of psychometric done on me in my past, in my career, in corporate setting as well. Like, there's a Hogan psychometric test as well. And one of the things that often was talked about is Krishna will become anybody he actually seeks to become.
Okay.
So if you ask him to become this, then he can. So it's almost like I can morph into things. It all depends on whether I find meaning in that thing or not.
Right.
That's the insight that emerged for me as a person. Answering your question on the earliest time, I think it really goes back to when I joined engineering right after my 12th grade in Bombay.
Were you like, how good were you as a student?
So I was actually probably top quartile as a student. I would say I was in the top decile, like, the top 10%. Maybe I was in the top 25%. Uh, so not exceptional as a student, definitely not. But I think I hadn't discovered exactly what I was exceptional at, right, at that point.
So what we are saying is CTO of Cleartrip, CHRO of Flipkart, and now CTO, Chief People Officer
at Flipkart as
at
well.
Flipkart, and now the Chief People Officer of Nudge Institute was not an exceptional student, and he has achieved all of that. So I think that's the great piece. Would love to know more about it. Please continue.
Yeah. So I think straight out of college, I said I'll go to engineering. And I joined an engineering college and I absolutely hated it. Like, I did not find my mojo. I did not feel like I was myself in those classes. And at a point in time, I was really afraid to talk about it with my parents because my parents were extremely like focused on getting me into engineering. So I think I kind of like did that. I made that very big shift and I joined a BSc Math. And BSc itself is considered like a poorer, much poorer cousin than an engineering degree.
Yes.
And, I got a lot of societal flack from my cousins, my uncles. What are you doing? Leaving your engineering degree, and what are you going to do with a BSc in math and things of that nature? But those were the first really, really amazing years of my sort of education uh, system because it just so happened that I had one of the best math teachers.
What was missing? Right. So you're enjoying maths, right? What was it that was actually missing that you thought that, hey, I should actually look beyond this?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I didn't feel that there was anything missing. I was looking at that point in time, if I honestly give you an answer, I felt there was something missing, but I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
Like, what was the next step after a BSc in math was the question in my head.
Sure.
I didn't have the answer at that point in time. And what was the best way to emerge with an answer? Or should I be on a path of discovery where now that I've understood the origins of math, can I try a degree in a liberal arts college where I transfer over all my credits which I learned in the 3 years? I lose a year in the process because I have to start in third year again because I can't get into the final year directly. So I joined an undergrad liberal arts college out of Ohio in the US, where in a liberal arts program, which actually is now become popular in India, sort of, more and more like there's, Ashoka, there's Flame in Pune, there's a bunch of institutes that have come up. But liberal arts, the entire pedagogy or the system is basically the belief that you don't know what you're good at. We will give you a sampling of everything that you can lay your hands on.
Oh wow.
And in the process, discover what you're good at and what you're passionate at.
Right.
What you're good at may not necessarily be what your passion is also, by the way.
Yes.
Right? So you figure out what you're good at first, and that leads you towards the next set of steps. And so I joined the liberal arts college. And the intention at that point in time was I will do a math degree yet again, like yet again as in 2 more years of math in the liberal arts college. But in the process, take a bunch of courses, right? Now, when I got into the math class, I found out that there were a lot of applications that I could leverage into the computer science courses. And like I built my first operating system, right? And when I did that, a lot of my math courses, my foundation was so strong that I was able to easily sort of come into that.
Yeah.
And I would say the more theoretical computer science courses came naturally to me.
Yeah.
The more applied computer science courses was a bit of a was a steep learning curve, but I managed it. So then what it occurred to me is while I do the liberal arts college, can I actually major in computer science?
Yeah.
And so I majored in computer science, not math. And that just happened in those 2 years that I was there. And I managed to major in that and do a bunch of liberal arts courses. I also happened to, by the way, do a minor in classical studies, which is nothing but ancient history.
Yeah.
Right. So now I had a major in computer science and a minor in classical studies.
So two things here. One is when you mentioned about ancient history, right? What is one thing that you think is something that people don't usually know, but they should know? Especially, I think people who are currently, let's say, mid 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
What is that, please?
I think the origin of things, like we assume that a thought is so endemic to India or a food or a practice, but you'll be surprised that many of the things also come from foreign cultures.
Okay.
Or we have given something to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Right? And understanding human thought, you'll be surprised at the origins of this through ancient history.
How it has changed you as a person?
I think for me, ancient history in general, it evokes a sense of where is my origin? And I also think a lot about the backstories of things. Like, why is this person behaving in this particular way?
Sure.
Never actually be judgmental of that person, but always think about the backstory.
So this was quite interesting. You mentioned about passion and your like what you are good at.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about passion and what you're good at. What is your passion and what is it that you're good at? I'm sure that you are trying to kind of align both of these, but in general, right, what it has been over let's say last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
If you
I think what I'm really good at is the ability to actually nurture people. In that process, build very thriving, high performance teams in pursuit of a mission. Right? That mission could be building Flipkart. Mission could be building a product for Cleartrip. Now the Nudge Institute, but like that's my core. That's what I'm good at. And what I've tried to combine is taking that good and putting it in service of what I'm passionate towards.
Okay.
So I think the passion about making sure that I can give back, for instance, to society at large is through what I'm good at. So if I'm a chief people officer at the Nudge Institute, in that way, I maximize on what I'm good at, but it's in the service of the Nudge Institute, which is actually working towards societal goodness.
Wow.
Right? So how can you marry what you're good at and what your passion is?
Did you kind of found that this is what you you might be passionate about, or you might really be finding meaning into. And then how did you navigate through that? How much time did you take? I'm asking for those users who
Yeah.
have not really found it. And I don't know what age were you when you kind of think you thought that I might have found it. And more so, maybe even is there something too early, too late? Because people are really worried about I'm 25, I'm 30, and I've not really found what I like.
Yeah.
Right. So yes.
Yeah, I think the key is, I think the really big answer that you have to get to is what are you good at first? I think somebody famously said this, that passion sometimes by itself as an end goal is not the goal that you should be seeking. In the sense, first you have to find out what you're good at, because you cannot contribute effectively to anything
Yeah.
through something that you're not good at.
Right.
So find your sweet spot first, right? What are you endowed with in terms of your innate skills, like stuff that you were born with?
Yeah.
You are different, I am different.
Sure.
So find what you're born with,
Right.
like what are those skills? Those are innate. Other skills are built over time through your
Yeah.
experiences, through all the stuff that you go through in your life, right?
Sure.
So how do you find what you're good at is through a path of discovery.
Well, when I was in college, right, I was actually discovering all of this, and we also started a platform specifically for students to navigate through careers, identifying what they're good at. I came around with 3I model, right? And I think this is what you were also saying. First I is introspection. Think about what you like, what you're good at, what do you enjoy, all of this. You need to spend time with yourself and think about it. This has to be uh, kind of not affected by what society is thinking. Second I is more around information. So what all is available, what all can be done, right? Finding out what all are the options. Information also means practical exposure, right? Getting some real experiences out of it. And third is interaction. So interacting with right set of mentors, interacting with right set of people, building that kind of network, right? So I think this is pretty much what you're saying, or you want to add on to that?
No, I think it's a very interesting framework. The aspect about information and also the ability for you to find your
Yeah.
interest first. And
Yeah.
you need more introspection for that to happen, for that
Right.
to emerge.
Right.
That's particularly powerful. The part I would like to add to it is that the aspect of introspection is not a like, and these stages that you talked about, they're not linear. They don't stop at any point in time.
Yes.
It's not like a stage. Oh, I have now introspected, I found my interest, then now I move on to information. And then,
Wow.
yeah.
Very
So
interesting.
if you think about it almost like a circle and it keeps flowing, and at various points in time, this entire framework gets applied.
Sure.
I think that's a more powerful way of thinking about it.
I think about purpose, right? And I very strongly look at what is my purpose. That is something very personal to me. And this question comes into my mind: have I actually found it yet or not? And to some extent, I could also figure out. Let's say last 7-8 years, I've been into certain direction which is aligned with a similar or single kind of direction. I want to call purpose is kind of a destination that I need to reach there, right? It is more about the area of focus or area of direction that I need to work on. When did you think? When do you think you kind of found that area of focus for yourself? When was it? Like in your career till now?
I think when it's easy to answer it in hindsight, right?
Uh-huh.
But for me, one of the things that I would like to say, Samyak, is that go back in time, even now,
Sure.
and you will find your purpose through asking this question: where were you immensely joyful? In where you were doing something, in the act of doing, and even by the way, thinking is also some aspect of doing, right?
Yeah.
You're not passively sitting.
Yeah.
But if you were doing something in your past, you will be surprised that there's a very strong connection between joy and purpose.
Right. Yes.
And so even though you may not have thought about it that way, like for me, as an example, the joy came when I was having a deep, insightful conversation like this with someone, but maybe in very, very different contextual settings. It could be
it need not be really career-wise,
Yeah.
right? What you're doing, not in your career, but otherwise as well.
Yeah, otherwise as well, right? You could be pursuing something and you discovered immense joy in that. That is your real purpose, because that's when I think you're absolutely at peace. You lose track of time. There's no concept of time that is there.
Wow.
And effort comes just effortlessly out of you.
Sure.
Like there's no sense of effort. Like if you, and then the analogy is like if you see Roger Federer play,
Right.
it's effortless,
Yeah,
right? When he
effortless,
plays
yeah.
tennis.
Correct.
And obviously there's a lot of immense amount of hard work and practice that goes beyond it.
And when it is effortless, you also kind of detach yourselves with the results, right? And that is where you really enjoy the best. Can I say this, that one major shift towards that kind of purpose, what you just mentioned, is when you kind of shifted your career from a tech to a people leader,
Absolutely.
which is fairly around 5-6 years back, 8 years back?
5 years back.
5 years back.
Yeah,
Five.
yeah.
Tell me more about that. So as context, you are working, maybe it is 2017, 18?
Yeah, 19.
19. 2018, 19, this is where you're working, you're leading one of the good verticals of Flipkart from
Yeah.
an engineering standpoint. Would love to know more about that piece. And today you get to your CEO saying that, hey, I'm not really liking this. I want to shift to a people space, people leader. Let's get into that piece. What is it that you're working on in Flipkart from an engineering standpoint? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So at that point in time in particular, I was actually working on a vertical in Flipkart that we called fulfillment. Essentially, basically, every time you place an order on Flipkart, from the time you place the order to the time it gets delivered to your whatever your address,
Yeah.
essentially that set of products is called fulfillment. And so I used to work on that vertical. And I think of that as the core of e-commerce. It's like the backbone of e-commerce.
Yeah. What was the most challenging problem in that? Or is it still there? Is it solved? Right?
So I tell Samyak that I'm going to deliver the order to you in 2 days. How do I give that answer of 2 days? And how do I make sure that I keep that promise?
So you are the one who kind of
Yeah.
built that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Great.
So that is the problem that we were trying to solve, and that was the hardest problem.
Sure. I think even before that period, I think what we see today as 1 day, 2 day was actually 5-6 days back then.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. Very interesting. Sure.
So that was the vertical I was leading.
Sure.
And,
So what went wrong?
I would say yes. I won't say anything went wrong per se, but I felt that increasingly I was getting drawn, like I got drawn into math, like I got drawn into the intersection of multiple disciplines in liberal arts. I got attracted to what does it take? The question started haunting me is, what does it take to build a culture where people are thriving? And it's not existing. People are not existing. They're not coming into work, but they're thriving. And the thriving aspect is a wonderful thing, right? We all spend more than half our waking hours, possibly
Sure.
close to 50% of our waking hours or even more, in our workplaces. And if our workplaces do not allow us to be something that where we can thrive,
Yeah.
life itself is like boring.
So you might be doing that in your team, right? Your engineering
Yeah.
team. You might already be doing that, right?
And that's the point, right? So whenever people came to me, my NPS in my team, my employee
Yeah,
NPS
yeah.
was the highest. My attrition was the lowest. HR used to come to me and talk to me about practices and say, Krishna, can I actually do this experiment in your function? And I was an early adopter. So think of me as one of those early adopters of a product,
Sure.
of a service around people.
Wow.
And I found myself, again, that point I mentioned about losing yourself. Those were the moments, even within the Flipkart ecosystem, where when I was having a conversation with the HR team, I would lose myself. That was more joy than building for the problem that we just discussed, which is how do I deliver in this quickest time. That problem became more, like the people problem became more interesting for me. So then I said, I'm doing this in my team. yes, to great success, I'm also getting a lot of recognition
Right.
in the organization for being a people leader. Now, why can't I do this at organizational scale? And Samyak, I think all of us need to think about this, right? What you're good at also at times becomes what you get passionate about.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that good itself drives your passion more and more. It's like a reinforcing cycle, so to
Wow.
speak.
Right.
And when I said, if I can do this at organizational scale,
Sure.
then my area of influence, if I think about my area of influence as concentric circles, first it was about one person, then it's about my team, then it's about an organization, and then it's about society. And if you think about each concentric circle becoming larger and larger,
Yeah.
and in pursuit of what you're good at, like leveraging what you're good at.
On a different note, uh, when I look at it, were you paid less when you made that shift?
Yeah, so a lot of my peer groups, again, like when I was dissuaded to leave engineering and join a BSc in math, I was
Yeah.
dissuaded very strongly by my peers who said a CPO or a CHRO career from a remuneration standpoint stands to lose as compared to a CTO career.
Doesn't matter.
It didn't matter to me at all.
Yeah.
I think I followed that piece around joy. Like, where did I find purpose in my work?
Sure.
And joy became paramount for me.
How did you go about it now? So you have decided that you. So what was the decision? Did you decide that you want to shift internally to a people function, or was it a idea that someone would might have given to you? What exactly happened?
No, actually, so it wasn't an idea. It emerged from me within only.
Wow, great.
Because when I discussed this with anybody else as an idea, I was dissuaded. I remember very, very famously sitting across a table with another very senior HR leader outside Flipkart.
Wow.
And she told me that this is the worst decision you could make, because in HR, people don't respect folks who come from the outside, who don't have a very strong foundation in HR. And how will you be successful, right?
Sure.
So it came from within me, but I then said I have to apply for this role. And very, very interestingly, the universe conspires when you have this thing about pursuing something that's very true to you. So at that point in time, the CPO position in Flipkart was vacant.
So would you be okay with taking us through that process, 2, 3 rounds, whatever, 4 rounds, and more importantly, I'm sure there might be certain inferiority also because this CHRO has told you that you don't have any background, so it would be looked very differently. I'm sure there are a lot of technicalities to CHRO role that you might have to learn during the process or after you kind of get into a CPO role there. What were those kind of inferiority that you had? Maybe if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question, Samyak. All of us have this aspect of picking up a new skill, a new domain. There's this initial hesitance. There's this force that resists us at times. But like somehow for me, like because this aspect of joy or passion, I'm just using that interchangeably right now, like where I found joy. I think it kind of was the biggest driving force for me to ride over every difficulty that I faced even during the interview process.
Yeah.
I remember very honestly that I was nervous at points in time. Flipkart had taken over Walmart, like Walmart had taken over, my apologies, my Walmart had taken over Flipkart at that time, and I had to meet a bunch of Walmart stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
And it was a very, I would say, nervous time. But every time I think I approached the conversation with saying, I have nothing to lose. I am following my heart right now. And if it works out, well and good. If it doesn't. So I think that piece of saying that I am going in with that free mind helped me a lot during the process.
Sure.
And I went through, actually, I would say maybe close to 4 to 5 rounds.
Okay.
5 rounds maybe. And both internal Flipkart leaders that interviewed me for the position.
Sure.
And also external stakeholders.
What did they ask you? If you can kind of tell me at that stage, a chief people officer interview, happening, and I'm sure for a panel also it would be quite interesting because you're not really interviewing a person who was maybe at a VP stage or let's say leading a particular function. So what was the conversations like?
I think there were a lot of conversations around intrinsics of leadership. What have you done from a culture standpoint within your microcosm of engineering teams to drive like this thriving culture that you talk about? What are some of your principles of leadership? What are you looking to drive as the vision for the organization from a people and culture standpoint? So I think they didn't test me on HR functional knowledge, right?
Well, they would assume that all of that you can do for
Yeah.
sure, but this is what the pure is.
So the intrinsics are where they spend a lot of time. So they asked me about scenarios that I have actually worked with. All right. How have you built teams? How do you approach difficult conversations? What have been some of the strategic shifts you made from a culture standpoint within your engineering teams? What has resulted in those outcomes? So I think very, very probing, powerful questions that reveal to them possibly how I thought about general people and culture.
What was one piece where you thought that, hey, this is what I've kind of maybe lacking on, or
Yeah, absolutely lacking on was the HR expertise, right? Like the years of experience under your belt. And if that was used as one of the markers to determine who's the best candidate for the job, then I would definitely not get it.
Right.
So that was always a egging thought in my head that
So degrees do not matter. Even experience does not matter as much as maybe how good you are at that piece. Right?
yes,
So even
yes,
from an experience standpoint, it's fine that you don't really. You definitely would know because of the kind of team that you were leading. But from a on paper documentation standpoint, you did not have any experience. Wow, great! And did you get time or more than them? I think have you worked with the founders, Sachin, Binny? Have you worked with them during that
absolutely,
time?
absolutely. I think when I joined Flipkart in 2012, obviously Sachin and Binny were at the helm. They are the founders leading Flipkart. It was 4 years into existence at that time. And I've worked very, very closely with both of them. Have great respect for them. Actually, Sachin was the first sponsor for the marketplace. Like Flipkart at that point in time was a single seller platform. It became a multi-seller platform marketplace as we know it today. And that was something that I built. And Sachin was the business leader for that vertical. So I worked very, very closely with Sachin.
So for the viewers, it became a marketplace and it was single seller needs that it used to buy and then it used to kind of.
No, there were a few prominent sellers,
Uh-huh.
very few of them at that
Sure.
point in time on the
Mhm.
platform.
Sure.
Now we have like close to, Flipkart has hundreds of thousands of sellers, right? So from that perspective, it's a very, very major shift, not in just the working of the platform, but the business model also.
Sure.
Right.
And you work with Sachin on that?
Yes.
Okay. How is it working with, like for our generation, right? They're the pioneers who have brought in this startup ecosystem into the country, right? And had head on head work, like competing with the global leaders like Amazon. So how is it working with them? What's their mindset? What's his mindset? What is it he thinking when he's building that?
No, I think a very, very rare combination, I think both Sachin and Binny, of being visionaries and visionaries not truly just in the technology dimension, but even in the people dimension. Like take very bold bets, both on problems that you're solving and the people that you're taking bets on as well. Like I couldn't have like got the job of like say the chief people officer without their support, particularly Billy's support and those times. I also think about some of the people practices that they laid the foundation for the Flipkart that we know today.
Okay.
I mean, just think about an organization like you said, Samyak, that produced more than 200 odd startups
Yeah.
and what we call the Flipkart mafia
Sure. Yes.
from the stables of Flipkart to become entrepreneurs. The
And-
employees there There has to be something magical.
What is maybe discuss particularly that this is something that you really admire from a people practice standpoint that they that built. Uh, let's go more into those details.
I think the one that I really, there are many actually, but the one that I'd like to pick for our conversation is that they laid heavy emphasis on the inputs that go into solve a problem equitably to the output. Let me explain more.
Wow.
When you're solving a problem, many a time you can land superlative outcomes for that problem by taking shortcuts.
Yes.
As an example, if I want to double my revenue, I can do deep discounting from a business practice.
Yes.
I can also build a platform that allows me to scale to 2x fairly quickly.
Sure.
But what they laid equal emphasis on in evaluating people, which is the core of the performance management system at Flipkart, is that your inputs also were measured. So, what did the engineering design that you conceptualized in pursuit of that problem?
Wow. It doesn't really matter. It matters, but it doesn't really matter that much on what you achieved. But definitely, if you're experimenting, it's important to even look at what exactly are you inputting.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that was a very big step for a startup, because a startup could easily lose sight of inputs and say, what matters to me is my existence, and I just need to search for outcomes and outputs.
Wow.
So that I think is the biggest thing for me.
So, Krishna, you discussed about the early days of Flipkart. And when I look at Flipkart from a technology standpoint, big billion days is a big deal, right? Were you there when like the first big billion day happened?
Absolutely, I was there. I remember it very vividly.
Okay. What happened? Like, was it smooth? Was it well planned? How was it?
We thought it was well planned, but the results turned out to be something very different. The site went down.
Okay.
And
After the big billion day started.
absolutely, on the day that the big billion day started, and in those times it wasn't multiple days, it was just one day. Yeah. And I remember we thought that we had done everything right from an engineering standpoint. We had scale tested the systems, but they did go down. And we all were absolutely like on our toes, anxious, because Sachin and Binny also were like in the corridors, in the desks, they were roaming around.
This was midnight.
Yeah, it was
So 12.
early hours of like the day. Like
Okay.
just after midnight, yeah.
So till when it went well and when did it broke?
I don't recall exactly, honestly, Samyak. But I remember that we did go down for I would say an hour or so.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's huge.
yeah, and then we got back on our feet, if I remember correctly.
Was it overload of transactions happening or visitors?
Yeah. So it was just the sheer amount of volume, user traffic that we were getting, and that it's like a funnel, right?
How are you feeling then?
That time
What
I was
was
petrified. We were really petrified.
Tell me more about.
So we obviously thought that we had done everything right. So then when it went down, everybody was running helter skelter to figure out the root cause of the problem.
How are Sachin and Binny reacting to it?
I think I remember Binny being a lot cooler. Sachin obviously being a little bit more anxious.
Yeah, he
But-
seems to be more like aggressive. Is it like
No,
as in
not aggressive. I wouldn't describe him, but I think he was more hands-on in terms of running the technology side of the business. So he had a greater interest in that as well. But that was just crazy time, yeah.
right? And then you had a good party after that, like after successful beginning day. Yeah. So that was very interesting. Let's look at it for the viewers, or let's say managers, founders, right? What is that piece of Sachin and Binny that you would want these founders or managers to actually take from them when, let's say, they're looking at scaling their company, just starting or maybe looking at scaling their companies to where Flipkart is today? What are those pieces that you really admire?
Yeah, that's a very powerful question. I think the answer is very simple in the way they define the values of Flipkart.
Okay.
So Flipkart's values were ABC: audacity, bias for action, and customer centricity. For me, those are like the cornerstones of what got Flipkart here today. Be audacious in pursuit of defining your goals. Like when there was absolutely no supply chain infrastructure in the country, they decided to build eCart. Both of them did not have any prior background in supply chain on what it takes to build a logistics network. That for me is an example of audacity. Bias for action is deeply rooted in the company, that it's constantly searching for. You can have all these grand plans on paper, roadmaps, all of that, but you need to execute. And so the strong focus on making sure that you get ship something out of the door, even though it may not be perfect, but then iterate, build on it is the second value, right? And the third is constantly keep focus on the customer. And this is obviously something that most companies want to follow, but rarely follow. But that is something that I would say, these are the three big, I would say, lessons that one can pick up from Sachin and Billy.
Right. And how do they implement it when they're scaling? Because what I feel is it becomes difficult to implement as you scale, right? It's easier when you're a small team, let's say 400, 500 people, but when you scale, how did that happen or how is that happening even now?
Yeah, I'll put it across to you very simplistically, but it's about weaving that value into everything that you measure people on.
Oh,
Like what behaviors are rewarded versus not.
wow.
If somebody is audacious, thinks about a big idea, are they given license to follow that idea?
Got it.
Right?
Wow.
If somebody is more of a thinker and less of a doer, do they succeed at Flipkart? I think everything that we did, if the values are not weaved into how you manage, reward, recognize people,
Sure.
all values are hollow.
Very, very interesting. And now, like you're going into like you started with the Nudge Institute, right? We'll get into those ideas, but because we're talking about people here, what what do you think specifically from a technology standpoint, right? How do you see technology and perhaps give simple examples on HR and technology coming hand in hand? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's a big shift that's happening in front of us. HR traditionally, the use of technology in the HR domain was always IT. And for me, IT has a very, very different connotation as compared to technology.
Right.
IT is like saying, this is my process, mimic it through technology, which is workflow automation.
Yes.
And
Correct.
that loses the big picture completely in today's day and age. It's all about ensuring that you actually transform the people processes through technology. Let me give you an example. You talked about different types of people that might exist in an organization.
Right.
When we talk about consumer side personalization, intelligence, you know exactly what reels would appeal to you today.
Yeah.
Why not that happen to an employee within a company? Why not policies, what you see on your so-called HR app, be excessively personalized for you? You could be a returning mother to work. What matters to you is very different from somebody who's joining out of campus.
Wow.
Now, if all of the things that you cater to in terms of that employee is personalized, it changes the game. And you can't do that at scale without technology.
Right. I've seen particularly HR as one of the core business functions, right, which has actually adopted or trying to adopt technology really fast as compared to other functions, which I think is a shift of last 2.5 years. Being in the space, it was very difficult to actually get HR to use technology, and now with AI and all of that coming in, one thought that I had was maybe they might feel that this might take my job, right? But I think it is not about any particular organization. Throughout organizations, HRs are very, very particular about how they're using technology pretty well. Do you at Nudge or maybe at Flipkart, like what are some interesting simple technology use cases in HR that you are following?
Yeah. So absolutely, we can talk about that to some extent. I think, um, like we had this so-called model that we built,
Okay.
data science model, to predict the longevity of an employee at a the company.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Based on a variety of, say, parameters that get fed into the model over time. And then the model learned, and it could say pinpoint with some degree of accuracy. Yes, there was, every model
Yeah.
gets measured on precision, accuracy, and so forth. I think we got it to an extent where we could just leverage the model to give us early warning systems.
Yes, that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, on potential exits that might happen in the organization. For
Sure.
me, that was a very powerful.
Basis what all parameters?
So it's based on, for instance, like you could talk about the way the employee actually comes in, builds code. If they're an engineer, the level of artifacts that they're contributing
Sure.
into their work, right? Because it's not just quantity. Obviously, there's a quality angle to all of this, but you could look at that. You could look at the frequency of conversations that the employee is having through one-on-ones that might be happening.
Sure.
You could look at their performance trajectory, like the ratings that they got over subsequent, say,
Very interesting.
quarters. Is it plateauing? Were they performing exceedingly well, and suddenly you saw a plateau?
Right.
That could be. These are all like pinpointed signals that you could actually feed in as data points that will give you that.
Sure. And I think key pieces to keep on storing that data. I think a lot of organizations are currently missing out on.
That's
that
absolutely.
piece, right.
I think in HR, the biggest problem is what I call is the data plumbing problem. Like they have over time accumulated a lot of tech debt with multiple HR systems being used. Like one is a core HRMS,
Yeah.
then there's something for employee recognition, something for payroll, but they're not able to get these systems to actually, one, combine all the data sources into what we would traditionally think on the consumer side. We would always build like a data warehouse, we would build BI on it.
Yeah.
All of these things are, I would say, underdeveloped because the data fidelity is missing in the HR universe.
Right. So question on maybe you might have experienced that at Flipkart particularly. Flipkart is, by the way, one of the top employers at IIT Delhi. I was I was observing that this year as well, and this generation, right, is very. So that's my take. It's very difficult or a very different generation than usually maybe last 10, 20 years or 25 years. I think the last shift happened before that. And now there is a major shift that is happening, and this shift is happening very frequently now.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with such generational shifts, or let's say how do you transit through different generations working together with different mindsets?
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting point, right? Like, I think gone are the days where HR used to think about employee workforce. First of all, HR as a human resource, right? That is gone because now every single person in the office, in the workplace, they have like a different sort of stage that they're in their life and what they're looking for in their organization. So, how can HR become increasingly more hyper personalized? Is, I would say, catering to multiple generational stages as well, right? Like you have millennials in the workforce, you have Gen Z in the workforce, right? You have different types of people. So, how do you actually change the game and not think of people as resources, but people as people? And how do you personalize is for me the biggest shift that needs to happen.
So, right, I think this was good. Now, uh, what I found very interesting, Krishna, is about the shift that you've made now, right? From, let's say, a technology role to a people role.
Yes.
And now, I think from a technology company to more around, I would call it people focused organization with what I know about it is working on ground and eradicating poverty, with poverty also having different meanings to it. Please take us through what do you do at Nudge Institute as an organization?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, great. I think it's a big shift for me personally. I moved, like you said, from a technology company to a not-for-profit focused company, what we call the development sector. And the Nudge Institute, simply put, its mission is probably one of the reasons I joined them in the first place. It's so inspiring. It's about a poverty-free India within our lifetime.
Oh, okay.
And these things are extremely important to the Nudge Institute because it's within our lifetime. That brings again that bias for action that we talked about in the Flipkart context
Yeah.
is echoed in the Nudge Institute's mission, where there's a sense of urgency in pursuit of this mission. Like it's not about a pipe dream that's going to happen 100 years later. It is about within our lifetime. So, which means we need to bring in urgency in our work towards that, right?
Sure.
And poverty free is something that we believe that everybody in India has a right to dignified living. And we need to cater to the most impoverished in the country. And how do we make sure that we solve that in a more sustainable and resilient way through livelihoods? That's what the nudge does. Essentially, it targets think about the bottom rung of the pyramid, absolutely. And how do we actually impart skilling and through that create livelihoods for them so that they're able to actually graduate from their poverty scale to a higher stage.
Got it. Got it. I think all of this very interestingly making so much sense that CTO of Cleartrip becoming a CPO of Flipkart, and I don't think so. It's a question on why did you join Nudge Institute after, let us say, this conversation that we have had for last around an hour or so. I would love to go more into details about what's happening on ground, right? Because I feel that it is people like us who really need to work on ground to solve these problems. At the same time, we cannot really do much. It has to be those people who we need to kind of give them the right platform in a way, right? So how exactly that's happening on ground? Let's get into some stories of Nudge Institute that you have observed with whatever time you spent
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there are absolutely stories that are ripe every day that I hear about the work that our folks are doing on the ground. Um, I would say that first of all, just to understand the construct, we identify families in a particular region where we actually identify them as beneficiaries of a program. And we call this program an economic inclusion program.
Okay.
And we impart a variety of interventions to that family so that they're able to climb out of poverty. And these volunteers on the ground, they are the ones who work with that family on a day-to-day basis. There's no Saturday, there's no Sunday.
Wow.
And it's actually very, very hard work because you're going out into the field. Say you're imparting the skilling of how do you create a way to actually run a goatry, as an example. You need to rear goats for a living. Now, starting with how do you construct the shed, how do you do the requisite, well-being of the goat so that there isn't a high mortality rate in your livestock. All of that needs to be imparted. And these stories, people are traveling to the remotest parts of the country and they have
Which
to visit.
areas are you guys
So we operate across 8 states.
Okay.
And these states include Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Karnataka. So there are multiple states. In fact, Meghalaya
Oh,
of
wow.
late as well.
Right.
So I think multiple states across the country.
So from a very fancy Flipkart office in Bangalore, maybe, right, to uh, to a remote village in Jharkhand,
Yeah.
right? What do you enjoy? What do you like so much that you have made such a transition here?
I think obviously the office in Bangalore is also a good one for the Nudge Institute. I love the office, but yeah, the transition, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we were discussing, right? You really need to, you are visiting those villages, you are seeing what your people are doing so that you can work for these people, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean it from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to make a lot more field visits myself. Like I've spent very little time at the Nudge Institute as of now. But I think what I've learned and understood is that again it goes back to Samyak, what we talked earlier, right? Where do you find joy? in your work. And now I find more joy in the work that I'm doing.
Wow.
And as compared to what I was doing, and not that the work that I was doing earlier was not joyful, it was absolutely joyful. But at every stage, I think you need to reevaluate what brings you joy. And for me at this stage, I think this is what brings me joy.
Krishna, I am thinking about so you have had good experience, have made decent money with these corporates, right? And now you're at that stage where you can actually think about all of this. Uh, is that true, or like, is this the age to actually look into that, or do you now, given a chance, if let's say you know about all of this, do you suggest people going into not for profits? I'm not really talking about from a let's say profile or monetary or all of those standpoints. I'm actually talking about people usually say that I really want to do this, but once I've actually done all of this in my life, right? Is that the right thought process? Or like, how should one go about it when, let's say, they're in their uh, 20s, 30s? Uh, how should one navigate through that?
No, I think the answer is that there is no right time to join the development sector. Like there is no right time to join a startup.
Yeah.
Like when the same question could be asked, I'm in a very established organization.
Yeah.
When is the right time that I should join a startup? Even in the for-profit world.
Yes. Right. Right.
I think the question is there's no right time per se. It's about what are you seeking and what are some of the things that are core to you, that matter to you, and what are you willing to trade off? Because choices are choices. By definition, a choice means is you're making a trade-off against something
Yes.
else.
Right.
So there are people at the Nudge Institute who have joined us, straight out of college after their masters in social work. There are reputed institutions in the country, like the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. There are people straight who venture out and say, I want a career in social sciences.
Yes.
And there are people like me who joined the Nudge Institute at very late stages in their career. So these are two very ends of the spectrum, so to speak, right? I think what are you able to contribute? What drives you is are the core questions that you should ask yourself, and what are you willing to trade off? I think the part about having a very good bank balance and saying now is the time that I should work in the not-for-profit sector is I would say is probably just one way of looking at it. I would urge people to think very, very differently. That ask these core questions to yourself and figure out.
From a meaning standpoint, right? You joined Nudge because you're finding a meaning which is much more closer to what you want. In last 6 months or so, uh, what is there anything that you did not expect? Right, because I remember when I so there's a Basti slum area near IIT Delhi, and we used to go there sometimes, and when to teach students. And I remember very clearly my first year when I was going in that slum. I thought that I'm going to change their world. I'm going to teach them so much. I'm going to do this, going to do that. And then when I saw this, when I went there, the energy that I got from there was it changed my thought process for all, right? So is there any such experience that you've had?
No, I think absolutely right. Like the passion I see of people around me, like what drives them at the Nudge Institute is inspiring, truly inspiring. And people from very, very different backgrounds that you get to talk to, what motivates them to do what they do every day is, I would say, deeply energy giving. You and there are people who don't have as many resources to do the work that they do, but they make such an impact. So it's like the thematic is do more with less, right? Because like in the for-profit world, you have like a lot of things at your disposal.
Right.
But in the not-for-profit world, you are answerable to a set of donors. You have to make sure that the impact counts. And I would say, I would argue that you're held to even higher degrees of accountability.
Great. Great. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. And I think just before we end it, we have this segment where we decode your mindset. If you can quickly take us through what your mindset has been in last 8 years, maybe year on year, or maybe phases that you see, and more importantly, where do you see it going now? Where do you see yourself, your thought process going now, and where are you taking yourself in
Yeah.
future? Yeah.
If I may, Samyak, I mean, your mindset is something which is so core to you that I don't know whether it really fundamentally changes year to year. Like the common thread for me has always been, for lack of better words, that constant search, the seeking, the learner inside me
Right.
that wants to always figure out what next, what can I pick up, how can I expand my arc of influence. And that's what drives me, right? Because going from like a technology based career to a people career and now the not for profit world, I think if you look at as the dots, they
Yeah.
seem like disconnected, but they are not. What has always helped me on this journey is the curiosity, the fact that I'm always seeking greater impact in my life, and what can I learn in that process. And don't be afraid to learn anything which is completely alien to you as well. So I think that is the mindset that I've been fortunate to be endowed with. And I think that's what will lead me in my future as well.
Wow, wow, great. I think this has been such a great conversation, right? From wellness, health, to navigating the purpose, to the technology giant, right? And then to the not for profit segment, which is I think the real impact, and what you rightly mentioned, right? India needs it, and today is the right time. As I have this core belief that this is going to change. Whether to be a part of that change is your choice. Whether you want to be part of that change or you want to just be an audience is definitely your choice. It was lovely, Krishna, to have spent this time with you. Thanks a lot. I'm sure the viewers also enjoyed it a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Samyak. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better Saturday morning in terms of conversations that we had. Absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Samyak.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks a lot.